People who've used glory booths. What wild thing happened? Story 1. So there's this spot near me I've heard a lot of rumors about. Let's just say, it's known for having some very curious booths with sausages having out regularly. I've seen those kinds of places in videos before, and my curiosity finally got the best of me. I decided to check it out, strictly for research, of course. I stepped into one of the booths, and let's just say it was very interactive. There were a few openings in the walls, you know the kind, and even some little peepholes. I was nervous, not sure what to expect, so I popped in some money and let the screen do its thing. As I got more comfortable, I started to enjoy myself. Then things got interesting. A voice from the other side said he liked what he saw. Moments later, someone decided to participate, without ever showing their face. I was in total disbelief. But I went with it. I mean, why not? What happened next was like something straight out of one of those videos I've seen, thrilling, anonymous, and honestly kind of empowering. It's wild how not knowing who's on the other side can make everything feel so much more intense. Let's just say, I had a very hands-on experience, more than once. One visitor turned into two, then more. I stayed safe, of course, and I even came prepared, wipes and all. But the rush? Unmatched. I left that place feeling like I had just lived out a fantasy I didn't even know I had. And yes, I'm definitely planning to go back. I might even set myself a little challenge next time. Story 2. Over the weekend, the guy I'd been casually seeing invited me to a party at one of his friends' places. It wasn't just any get-together. It was one of those wild nights where the music's blasting, everyone's dancing a little too close, and the drinks are flowing like water. As the night went on, the conversations got more provocative. Let's just say nothing was off limits. Group hookups, secret fetishes, and then glory holes. Someone mentioned there was a makeshift setup in the basement, and suddenly everyone was intrigued. I wasn't exactly planning to explore that kind of thing, but after a few rounds of tequila, my curiosity, and my boldness, went up a few notches. Let's just say I've always had a thing for being a little adventurous after a few drinks. I whispered to my guy that I was heading to the bathroom. He gave me that look, the one that says he knows I'm up to something, and lightly grabbed my hip as I walked away. Down the hall, I found two side-by-side bathrooms and ducked into one. As I locked the door, I noticed a very intentional hole in the wall. It was perfectly positioned, and before I could even process what was happening, someone on the other side decided to take advantage of the setup. I was stunned and seriously tempted. Maybe it was the tequila, maybe it was the thrill of the unknown, but I didn't hesitate for long. I leaned in, teasing, playing along with the moment. The anonymity made everything feel more intense, like I was living out a scene from one of those steamy videos I'd only watched before. The whole thing was over in minutes, but my heart was racing like I'd just run a marathon. I texted my guy to meet me near the bathrooms. When he showed up, I pulled him into the next room. This time, I was in full control, and the connection between us was electric. What he didn't know was that I'd already had a little head start on the fun. But that's the thing about secrets. They're even better when they're deliciously wicked. By the time we got back to my place, he was still glowing from the night. And me? I had one more surprise in store. He definitely didn't mind. Some stories are better left untold, but they make the best memories. Story 3. This story includes male-on-male themes, so if that's not your thing, feel free to skip. For those who stay, I'm just here to share something personal. It's been on my mind for a while, and since no one in my life knows this side of me, I figured maybe someone out there might connect with it. I'm 31, and to be honest, this past year has been one of the hardest of my life. I caught COVID and ended up isolating for nearly 2 months. It was rough. Somewhere in the middle of that, my wife of nearly a decade decided she wanted out. She didn't want anything, no money, no house, just a fresh start. We didn't have kids, so it was as clean a break as you can get, legally anyway. Emotionally, it wrecked me. Before I met her, I had a brief but unforgettable experience with another man. He was older, patient, and kind, and he let me explore things at my own pace. I never felt judged or rushed. That time in my life left me with no doubts that I wasn't entirely straight. I genuinely enjoyed being with him. But life happens. I moved back in with family, that chapter closed, and soon I met my wife. I loved her deeply, but I also knew that some parts of me would have to stay hidden. She wasn't against people being queer or bi, but she wanted monogamy, and she had very traditional thoughts about masculinity. I never told her about my past. I didn't want to risk what we had. Over time, our connection faded. And when she left, I was devastated. I shut down for months. Worked, slept, and that was about it. Eventually, I started putting myself back together. And one of the first things I realized was that I wanted to explore that part of myself again. It had been over 10 years. I wasn't even sure how to begin. But then one day, I stopped by an adult bookstore to pick up some things, and I noticed they had a back room, an adult arcade. $5 for an hour. I was curious, had time to kill, and figured why not. What I walked into felt like a secret world. Dim hallways, closed doors, quiet footsteps. It was oddly quiet, but full of tension. I picked a booth, sat down, and took in my surroundings. 2 walls, each with a very telling hole cut at waist level. My pulse picked up. I knew exactly where I was, and what this was for. I wasn't planning on anything happening. But when the first man slipped something through the wall, a silent invitation, I froze. I didn't touch, didn't move. Just stared. He eventually left, and I exhaled sharply, unsure whether I was relieved or disappointed. It happened again. And again. Men would appear, hopeful and silent, and I just watched. 6 times. I was so close to doing something, but I couldn't bring myself to cross that line. Not yet. My hour ran out, but the experience lit a fire inside me. I couldn't stop thinking about it, the anticipation, the anonymity, the possibilities. So I returned the next day. This time I bought 3 hours, determined not to let the moment pass me by again. It took a little while, and some men came and went. I was picky. If I didn't feel comfortable, or wasn't into it, I didn't engage. But eventually, someone came along that felt right. Clean, respectful, quiet. I took a breath, got down on my knees, and let myself surrender to the moment. It all came rushing back, those feelings I hadn't felt in over a decade. That sense of being completely consumed by desire, of giving and receiving pleasure without words. It was electric, intimate in a way that's hard to explain. Afterward, I sat back in the quiet, breathing hard, stunned by what I had just done, and how good it made me feel. I had rediscovered something I thought I'd buried forever. And it didn't stop there. One man left, another arrived. For hours I stayed, giving, receiving, reclaiming a part of myself I had tucked away in a box for far too long. Story 4. So, I went to this apartment party the other weekend, and let me just say, it was not your average get-together. People were drinking, flirting, and swapping wild stories all night. But the thing everyone kept talking about was this very specific closet door in the bathroom. Above it, someone had scribbled "glory hole" in Sharpie with arrows pointing to a hole in the door. At first, I thought it was just a prank, like something someone did after a few too many drinks. But as the party went on and the drinks kept flowing, I found myself thinking about it a little too much. I was tipsy, curious, and, let's be honest, kinda turned on. After debating with myself for way too long, I finally slipped into the closet, locked the door behind me, and waited. I had my drink and my phone and a whole lot of nerves. I figured I'd probably chicken out, but then I heard the bathroom door open and someone ask, "Anyone there?" My heart jumped. I answered, "Yeah, I'm here," but kept my voice low. I didn't want to be recognized. This was not something I wanted to explain at brunch the next day. He hesitated. "Really? You sure?" I replied quickly, "Yeah." And then, silence, followed by the unmistakable sound of a zipper. And just like that, it was happening. I thought I'd freeze, but honestly, the nerves pushed me into action. I leaned forward and gave him a moment he probably didn't expect at a random house party. From then on, it was like word got around. One guy became 2. 2 became, well, I lost count. Some said hi. Others didn't say much at all. I stayed in that little closet for the rest of the party, half thrilled and half terrified someone would figure out who I was. But no one did. Eventually it got quiet. The music died down. Someone opened the bathroom door and softly said, "Hey, you can use the shower if you want. Everyone's going to bed. Just shut the door when you leave." I didn't shower, but I cleaned up the best I could, waited a few minutes, and made a quiet dash for my car. Still not sure if that closet was a joke that got out of hand or a secret tradition, but I definitely walked out of that party with a story I'll never forget. Story 5. Yesterday, I had some time between client visits and decided to peek into one of those hookup apps. You know the type. I wasn't expecting much, but I spotted someone nearby who seemed interested. We chatted, flirted, and things looked promising until he ghosted. Happens more often than you'd think. Instead of heading straight home, I figured I'd stop by a local adult bookstore. It's a quieter spot I know, with a small arcade in the back. Not the most welcoming place, mostly because the guy at the counter always seems annoyed to be there. But I didn't care. I knew what I was looking for. I made my way to the booths I remembered having certain features. My plan was simple: watch a little, unwind, and call it a night. It's usually empty, so I wasn't expecting anything more. But this time, there was someone in the next booth. I couldn't see much, just a glimpse of his lap through the divider. He looked put together, clean, quietly confident. There was something about that moment, how unexpected it was, that made everything feel electric. Before I fully knew what I was doing, I found myself kneeling, reaching out through the divider. He responded without hesitation, and the quiet tension between us grew stronger. There was no conversation, no introductions, just energy, rhythm, and a kind of unspoken understanding. The whole experience felt surreal. I was completely immersed, each movement purposeful and slow. I lost track of time, lost track of everything outside of that booth. For a few minutes, the world was just muffled sounds and rising heat. Eventually, everything built to a quiet, satisfying conclusion. He left without a word, and I stayed there a moment longer, catching my breath and feeling the rush settle into something calm. It was unexpected, spontaneous, and oddly affirming. Sometimes the best moments are the ones we never plan. Story 6. I'm a 32-year-old guy who's been married for over a decade. Like many long-term relationships, ours has had its highs and lows, especially in the bedroom. To be fair, some of the most passionate and satisfying moments of my life have been with my wife. She's petite, full of fire, and when we connect, we really connect. But over the years, things have changed. We've drifted in ways we didn't anticipate. Our intimacy started to fade, and at one point last summer, we were barely speaking. It felt like we were headed toward the end. During that dry spell, I found myself spending more time online, browsing NSFW communities, and stumbling across videos that blurred the line between fantasy and reality, especially ones involving anonymous encounters. There was something about the mystery, the intensity, the lack of pretense that captivated me. I began to wonder, were those situations real? Was there a world where people actually did this? Curiosity eventually led me to browse some hookup forums. Most were fake, but then I came across something that felt genuine. It was a post from a married woman offering a private experience, anonymous, discreet, and by appointment only. We chatted off and on for a while, exchanged a few photos consensually, and though I was hesitant at first, her persistence, and my own desire, finally pushed me to take the leap. I waited until my wife was sleeping and slipped out for what would be the most surreal experience of my adult life. It was a bit of a drive, and I was nervous the whole way there. But when I arrived, everything was as promised: a quiet side entrance, dim lighting, and a setup that felt both thrilling and oddly safe. I undressed and stepped into position, heart pounding. On the other side of the wall, I heard her voice, soft, excited, and then I felt her touch. The sensation was electric. Every nerve in my body was alive, and when our connection deepened, all my doubts disappeared. It wasn't just physical, it was immersive. She moved with confidence, with care. Every sound, every motion, pulled me deeper into the moment. For the first time in years, I felt completely seen and desired, not as a husband, not as a provider, but as a man with raw, unmet needs. She teased, she paced, she pulled me to the edge, and then back again. And when I finally let go, it was like a release I hadn't realized I needed. But it didn't end there. With a brief pause and a subtle shift, things became even more intense. Let's just say the experience evolved, and I found myself pushed to places I hadn't expected to go. The rhythm, the sounds, the connection through the wall, it all felt surreal, like I was stepping into a scene I'd only ever watched on a screen. When it was over, she gave a simple signal, and I whispered a quiet thank you. I got dressed, slipped back into the night, and drove home in silence, my body still humming from the experience. Back in bed beside my wife, I couldn't stop replaying what had just happened. It felt like a dream, but it wasn't. It was real. And while I'm still processing what it means for me, one thing is clear. There's a kind of intimacy out there that's different from what I've known, raw, anonymous, and deeply affecting. If there's a takeaway from this, maybe it's this: people who take the time to understand and fulfill the desires of others, without judgment, are rare. And whether that happens in a relationship or behind a wall, those moments can change you. Story 7. I've recently been on a bit of a personal adventure, exploring places most people only hear about in whispers or see in certain corners of the internet. Finding a decent glory hole spot. Honestly, that's the hardest part. But after a lot of, let's say, field research, I found one that was clean, low-key, and surprisingly social. What made it even more interesting was that I'd been chatting with Alice, a friend from the gym. We've shared more than just protein shake recommendations, if you know what I mean. One day, over coffee, I casually let it slip that I'd been to a few adult arcades, including one with a pretty wild reputation. I mentioned the place, hinted at some not-so-ordinary encounters, and told her the owner was sometimes involved. And well, let's just say he's memorable. She was intrigued. I could see the gears turning. So I kept nudging the conversation further, teasing the idea. Fast forward to yesterday. Instead of hitting the gym, we decided to explore the other kind of workout. We went together. And without getting too specific, let's just say we got very involved. There were a few visitors, a lot of excitement, and a whole lot of adrenaline. At one point, Alice even took the lead, inviting a few guests for a more interactive experience. I wasn't complaining. It all blurred into a chaotic, thrilling whirlwind. I remember laughter, some surprise moments, and the kind of messy fun that only makes sense in the context of the experience. One guy may or may not have gotten a little carried away with Alice's hair. Oops. By the time we left, we were breathless, buzzing, and absolutely sure of one thing. That was not your average Thursday. Story 8. About a year ago, curiosity got the best of me, and I decided to check out a local adult store. I'd driven past it a few times, always wondering what was inside. When I finally stepped in, I noticed there were some back rooms. I asked the clerk about them, and he told me they were video booths. I didn't really know what that meant at the time, but I was young, curious, and figured $5 wasn't a bad price for finding out. As I stepped past the main area and into the dimly lit hallway, I noticed a few men, mostly older, wandering between doors or quietly tucked into their own corners. I picked a booth at random and went inside, nerves racing. But once I sat down and began to hear what was happening in the booths around me, soft moans, low voices, rhythmic sounds, I started to relax. It was an odd kind of atmosphere, both anonymous and intimate. In the booth, I noticed a small hole in the side wall. I leaned forward, cautiously peering through, and what I saw froze me in disbelief. On the other side of the wall was my 10th grade teacher. She didn't notice me. She was completely absorbed in what she was doing, giving all her attention to someone else through the opposite wall. I felt a rush of shock and excitement that I wasn't prepared for. It was surreal, like watching a scene from some alternate reality. I sat back, heart pounding. I wasn't sure what to do. But the moment was overwhelming. Without really thinking, I let instinct take over and moved closer to the opening. Within seconds, I felt a hand, and then lips. What followed was a blur of sensation and disbelief. She was experienced, confident, and completely focused. Time felt like it slowed down. I couldn't tell if the other guy had finished or not, but she didn't stop. She stayed with me, and things escalated. Eventually, she pulled me in closer, and what happened next was more intense than I could have imagined. It was raw, electric, and completely unexpected. I don't know what she knew or didn't know. I didn't say a word. I just let the moment happen. And when it was over, I left quietly, before either of us could break the illusion. The whole experience stayed with me, not just because of what happened, but because of what it revealed about desire, anonymity, and the strange ways the past can meet the present. Story 9. I've always had a thing for the unknown. Something about surrendering control to a stranger, even just for a moment, has always sparked something deep inside me. The idea of letting someone experience me without introductions, expectations, or follow-up messages felt strangely freeing. That's how I ended up at AG Hole. To be honest, I never thought I'd actually go through with it. The idea stayed tucked in the back of my mind for a long time, just a quiet little fantasy I'd revisit now and then. But one night, I was feeling restless, craving connection without the baggage. So I decided to stop thinking and just go. The place wasn't exactly what I expected. A little colder, a little more clinical. But it didn't take long before I found myself on my knees, nerves buzzing, heart pounding, giving in to the moment. The first person who stepped in was less intimidating than I'd imagined. But that almost made it easier. The quickness of it, the lack of conversation, the simplicity, it was oddly comforting. I let myself be present, focused only on the sensation and the anonymity. Then came another, and another. Each person brought something different energy, different pace, different experience. Some were quick, some lingered. Some felt more intense, others more casual. But the common thread was the overwhelming thrill of surrendering to the unknown. By the time I left, I was breathless, a little dazed, and honestly surprised by how much I enjoyed it. Driving home, I replayed the night in my head, still tingling with adrenaline. I kept thinking, wow, I actually did that. And while part of me blushed at the memory, another part smiled. Because I didn't feel ashamed. I felt empowered. Story 10. Last night, I did something I never imagined I'd actually go through with, and I'm still buzzing from the experience. I spent nearly 2 hours behind a wall at a dimly lit adult shop that most people wouldn't even glance at twice. It was the kind of place with flickering lights, stained floor tiles, and an unspoken set of rules. And yet, something about the anonymity, the tension, and the anticipation pulled me in like gravity. What happened behind that wall was raw, messy, and deeply freeing. One by one, strangers came and went. I never saw their faces, never knew their names, and that was part of the thrill. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't overthinking, wasn't trying to be anything but present in the moment. By the end, I was a complete mess, makeup smeared, hair tangled, my upper body dotted with evidence of just how far I'd let myself go. And yet, I don't think I've ever felt more confident or more alive. There's something powerful about leaning into your own desire without apology, about giving yourself permission to just feel. Last night, I wasn't chasing validation or trying to impress anyone. I was simply embracing the chaos and loving every second of it. Story 11. Back in college, my boyfriend at the time opened up to me about a very specific fantasy he had. Let's just say it involved a wall, a hole, and a lot of imagination. He'd always been curious about trying it, and to his surprise, I was open to the idea too. At first, he even toyed with the idea of building something at home, until he realized being broke in college doesn't really pair well with DIY projects. So he did some digging and found a place, a real adult arcade a few hours away where people could, well, experiment. I was nervous, not gonna lie. But after a couple weeks of back and forth, I agreed to go. I figured, why not live a little? We planned it all out for a Saturday night. Before heading into the arcade, I insisted we stop at a nearby bar, because nothing says let's try new things like a couple of fireball shots, college, remember? With my confidence thoroughly cinnamon-flavored, we walked over to the arcade, which was about as glamorous as you'd expect. A little rundown, very dimly lit, and full of mystery. We found our way to the back, where a row of private booths waited. We slipped into one together, watched a bit of the local programming, and started getting into the mood. But just as things were heating up, nature called, because of course it did. I told him I'd be right back and went to find the bathroom, which was inconveniently located on the other side of the building. When I finally came back, I climbed into the booth next to what I thought was his. I called out softly, "I'm ready if you are," and heard someone on the other side of the wall responding. The plan was in motion. Then a surprise. Let's just say what appeared through the opening was not what I was expecting. It was impressive. Suspiciously different from what I remembered my boyfriend having. For a moment, I was confused. Had he arranged some kind of twist? Was this part of the plan? I called out his name. Silence. And that's when it hit me. I was in the wrong booth. Now, you might think this would bring everything to a screeching halt. But instead, I froze. Then I stared. Then I blushed. And then, well, I made a decision. Let's just say I got very caught up in the moment. After a few minutes, I texted my boyfriend to meet me in the hallway. I casually explained that I'd gotten a bit lost. We laughed about it, and I went into the correct booth that time. No confusion. No surprises. He went home very happy. And I never told him about that little mix-up. To this day, that night remains one of my wildest memories, and my most unexpected college story. Some secrets are just too delicious to share, until now. Story 12. I never actually thought these kinds of things were real. You hear about them, usually in stories that sound more like urban legends than anything else. But apparently, it doesn't take much to make one. A drill, a discreet location, and a little imagination. As it turns out, someone in my town had a bit of that imagination, and made one in the restroom of a local bar. I first heard whispers about it while wandering the Christmas market downtown. A couple of guys nearby were chatting just a little too loudly about something wild in the bar around the corner. I tried not to eavesdrop. Okay, I totally did, but once I caught the gist, my curiosity was officially lit. I don't know what it was about the idea, but it stuck with me. The secrecy, the anonymity, the idea of a shared experience without names or faces. It got under my skin in the most unexpected way. So one night, I decided to check it out. I went to the bar, ordered a drink, and did my best not to look like I was on some kind of mission. After a while, I casually slipped into the women's restroom and walked all the way to the last stall, the one that, I'd heard, shared a wall with the men's. Sure enough, there it was, a small flap in the wall, barely noticeable unless you knew to look for it. But I froze. I stood there, heart racing, and then left. I chickened out. I went home feeling more frustrated than I expected, partly because I didn't go through with it, and partly because, well, some curiosity is hard to shake. The same thing happened the next week. I went back, stood in that stall, stared at the wall, and left again. But they say the third time's the charm, and they were right. I went back once more, this time with a little liquid courage, 2 glasses of white wine. Thank you very much. I walked calmly to the stall. I waited, and after a few long, quiet minutes, I heard a knock. My breath caught. I knocked back. Then the flap lifted. What happened next? Well, let's just say things got very interesting. I'll leave the details to your imagination, but let's just say I ended up staying in that stall longer than I planned. And it didn't stop with just one encounter. Or 2. By the end of the night, I had a very different understanding of what letting go meant. I walked out feeling like a secret version of myself had just come alive. My body was humming with adrenaline, and I was glad I'd worn black pants, just in case. What surprised me most wasn't the experience itself. It was how much I enjoyed not knowing. Not knowing who was on the other side. Not knowing what to expect. Letting go of control, of context, of everything, and just feeling. And here's the thing. I used to think the best part of an intimate moment was the expression on someone's face, right when everything peaks. But this was something else entirely. So now I'm left wondering, what does it say about me that I found such freedom in such a strange place? If you've got any thoughts on that, I'm all ears. Story 13. I never actually thought these kinds of things were real. You hear about them, usually in stories that sound more like urban legends than anything else. But apparently, it doesn't take much to make one. A drill, a discrete location, and a little imagination. As it turns out, someone in my town had a bit of that imagination and made one in the restroom of a local bar. I first heard whispers about it while wandering the Christmas market downtown. A couple of guys nearby were chatting just a little too loudly about something wild in the bar around the corner. I tried not to eavesdrop. Okay, I totally did, but once I caught the gist, my curiosity was officially lit. I don't know what it was about the idea, but it stuck with me. The secrecy, the anonymity, the idea of a shared experience without names or faces. It got under my skin in the most unexpected way. So one night, I decided to check it out. I went to the bar, ordered a drink, and did my best not to look like I was on some kind of mission. After a while, I casually slipped into the women's restroom and walked all the way to the last stall, the one that, I'd heard, shared a wall with the men's. Sure enough, there it was, a small flap in the wall, barely noticeable unless you knew to look for it. But I froze. I stood there, heart racing, and then left. I chickened out. I went home feeling more frustrated than I expected, partly because I didn't go through with it, and partly because, well, some curiosity is hard to shake. The same thing happened the next week. I went back, stood in that stall, stared at the wall, and left again. But they say the third time's the charm, and they were right. I went back once more, this time with a little liquid courage, 2 glasses of white wine. Thank you very much. I walked calmly to the stall. I waited, and after a few long, quiet minutes, I heard a knock. My breath caught. I knocked back. Then the flap lifted. What happened next? Well, let's just say things got very interesting. I'll leave the details to your imagination, but let's just say I ended up staying in that stall longer than I planned. And it didn't stop with just one encounter. Or 2. By the end of the night, I had a very different understanding of what letting go meant. I walked out feeling like a secret version of myself had just come alive. My body was humming with adrenaline, and I was glad I'd worn black pants, just in case. What surprised me most wasn't the experience itself. It was how much I enjoyed not knowing. Not knowing who was on the other side. Not knowing what to expect. Letting go of control, of context, of everything, and just feeling. And here's the thing. I used to think the best part of an intimate moment was the expression on someone's face, right when everything peaks. But this was something else entirely. So now I'm left wondering, what does it say about me that I found such freedom in such a strange place? If you've got any thoughts on that, I'm all ears. Story 14. I'm literally shaking right now. I had to pull over before I even got home. I just had one of the most intense, surreal experiences of my life, and I'm still trying to process it. So for the past few days, I've been, let's say, curious. I've been reading about this kind of place, something hidden, anonymous, and thrilling. After doing a little research and getting some tips online, I started looking around to see if any existed near me. Most of the spots I came across were way too sketchy, and I nearly gave up. But then today, I found one. It was tucked inside an adult shop, not too flashy, but clean, quiet, and surprisingly well-maintained. The vibe was right. I walked in pretending to browse, trying not to make eye contact with anyone. I was nervous, like heart-pounding kind of nervous. I kept telling myself I could leave at any moment. But something kept me there. Eventually, I followed the instructions I'd read. Toward the back of the store were a few private booths. I chose one, stepped inside, and sat on the little stool. It smelled like cleaning spray, and everything was surprisingly tidy. There were these small openings in the walls on either side of me, and I just waited. I didn't know what to expect. Then I heard someone enter the booth next to mine. My chest tightened. I thought about bolting. But before I could even move, something happened that made it very clear what he was there for. I was frozen for a second. But then curiosity won. I won't go into detail, but let's just say I went further than I ever thought I would. It was quiet, just the sound of breathing and a few muffled reactions. And then it was over. I sat there, trying to catch my breath, wondering what the heck had just happened. I thought I was done. But then I noticed someone else had quietly entered the other side. It was like my nerves and my instincts were in a standoff. But the moment I heard that familiar sound again, that soft moan, I gave in. And this time, I didn't hold back. I stayed in that booth just a little longer, wondering if I'd keep going. But the adrenaline finally caught up to me. I grabbed my things, rushed out as quickly as I could, and someone behind me called out, but I didn't stop. I got in my car, peeled out of the parking lot, and now here I am. On the side of the road, heart racing, hands still trembling. It was wild. It was scary. It was thrilling. And honestly, I still don't know how I feel about it. But I know one thing, I'll never forget it.